Northern Ontario. October. From the highway, something rises that has no name for itself yet. 7 green domes. Massive. Layered in careful tiers wrapped in vine and mushroom, curving upward against a mill-town sky, like something ancient that wandered in from somewhere else. Somebody built this. At the top of the tallest one, a girl in rubber boots stands checking a temperature gauge. She doesn't look at the highway. She already knows. Below, a company SUV turns through the gate. Clean. Out of place. A man in a pressed suit steps out, folder under one arm, a legal letter folded in his breast pocket like a weapon he has not used yet. He looks at the farm. He starts laughing. She doesn't move. She has been waiting 7 years for this exact morning, and she has not come empty-handed. Marcus Elroy had not stopped laughing for 30 full seconds. 30 seconds is longer than it sounds. He was standing at the gate of the Holt property, east of Timmins, Ontario, 3 kilometers from the Northgate Mill, where his company SUV was parked in a designated space with his name on a laminated sign. Company folder under one arm. Legal letter folded into thirds in his breast pocket like a weapon he hadn't needed to use yet. Suit jacket pressed so clean it looked like armor. And he was looking at Lena Holt the way people look at something they genuinely cannot explain. She was 23. Rubber boots caked in something that was either clay or compost or both. Flannel shirt faded down to almost nothing from too many washes. Hair pulled back. No makeup. No apology about any of it. And an expression so still it could have passed for calm. It wasn't calm. She was waiting for him to be done. Let me get this straight. He wiped the corner of his eye, still smiling, still completely sure of himself. You called me out here, to this property, in October, to tell me I cannot stop the sawdust deliveries, because the sawdust is valuable. Lena didn't shift her weight, didn't look away, just waited. I didn't call you here about the sawdust, she said, quiet, like a door closing. I called you here to show you what I built. She pushed the gate open, stepped back, and said nothing else, because she didn't need to, because what came next was going to do the talking for her. Marcus Elroy walked through the gate and stopped. 7 domes, not hills, not piles, domes, shaped with intention, layered in careful tiers, each one rising higher than the one before it. The largest one stood almost 8 meters, green from surface to crown, climbing vine. Shelf mushroom, something low and dark that spread across the base like moss, choosing to stay. They curved upward against a sky the color of pewter. 7 of them in a line spaced with the kind of precision that meant someone had planned this and replanned it and gotten up early enough to check it before the light arrived. He didn't understand what he was looking at. For exactly one embarrassing moment, he thought he had walked onto the wrong property. And then he looked at the girl beside him. She wasn't watching the domes. She was watching him. Of course she was. She had been standing on top of dome number 7 at 6 that morning. Wind reading. Temperature gauge on the northeast face. Same checks she made every morning, the same way her father had checked the northwest corner every spring before the springs ended. Not because anyone told her to, because she had learned early, and by force, that the only way to truly understand something is to keep looking at it. Long after everyone else has looked away. Long after the looking feels pointless. Long after the people around you have decided what the thing is and moved on. Marcus Elroy had arrived with a legal letter in 15 minutes and a laugh that could fill a room. He would leave 3 hours later with something much harder to name. But to understand what he saw when he walked through that gate, to understand how a girl from a struggling farm and a fence line full of industrial waste became something this town could not have predicted. You have to go back to 2007, back to October, back to the afternoon a 16-year-old pushed her hand into the base of a sawdust mound and felt something no one expected. Back to the beginning of everything, which it turned out was not really a beginning at all. The Holt farm had 42 acres, thin soil, tired, the kind of land that gives everything it has for a decade and then starts asking for something back, and nobody has anything left to give it. Lena's grandfather had broken the ground in the early 60s. Her father, Hugh Holt, had spent his adult life trying to keep the thing alive, part farmer, part believer, part stubborn Northern Ontario man who didn't know how to stop. Hugh worked the land in the mornings, and then walked half a kilometer up the road to Northgate Timber, where he'd worked the line for 11 years, measuring cuts, running planer checks. The kind of job that doesn't have a title you'd put on a resume but keeps everything running. His foreman had called him the best man in the shed, past tense, because on a Tuesday in March 2005, a conveyor belt failed, and Hugh Holt was 41 years old and in the wrong place when it did. The company sent flowers, white, generic, the kind of arrangement that communicates condolence without personalizing it too much. A representative arrived in a car that was too clean for a farm visit with a tie that matched his clipboard, and a check that covered the funeral and approximately nothing beyond it. A formal letter of apology came 3 weeks later, in a white envelope with a company logo embossed on the corner. Lena kept it in a drawer for a year, then she threw it away. She was 14 when her father died, and she went quiet in the way that doesn't look like grief from the outside. No dramatic collapse, no obvious breaking, just quiet, steady, like a clock that keeps running even after the battery should have given out. The neighbors said she was cold. She wasn't cold. She had nowhere to put it yet. Her mother, Vera, was 42, and suddenly, the only person left. Mortgage, aging tractor, bookkeeping job in Timmins that paid enough to slow the bleeding but not enough to stop it, and the arrangement with Northgate, the trucks that came Tuesdays and Fridays and backed through the gap in the chain-link fence and unloaded their mounds of pale yellow sawdust. $40 a week. Vera kept the arrangement because Vera Holt did not throw away what could still be used. She had married a man who believed in finding value in overlooked things, and even after the man was gone, the habit stayed. By the fall of 2007, there were 4 mounds along the fence line, each one roughly 4 meters high. Cedar, pine, something sweet underneath that. Lena couldn't name but recognized. The smell of the mill shed on Saturdays when Hugh used to bring her along back when Saturdays still meant something. She was 16 now, 2 years past the end of those Saturdays, and there was a boy named Derek Vance in her grade 11 class. Derek Vance was not a complicated person. His father was shift supervisor at Northgate, which in the social economy of a small northern Ontario town made Derek Vance someone you didn't publicly cross unless you had something stronger than a reputation to protect you. Lena did not have a reputation. She had a farm with 4 sawdust mounds and a dead father and the kind of quietness that made other teenagers nervous, because quiet people look like they're thinking something about you, and Derek Vance did not like being thought about, so he named her first. Sawdust Girl. That was it. That was all it took. Small-town cruelty is almost elegant in its economy. One name, one person willing to say it first, and then everyone who is afraid of being next will laugh. They laughed. Lena had one friend, June Aldrich. They had been close since 4th grade in the specific way of childhood friendships, sitting next to each other before anyone explained the seating arrangement, finishing sentences, without knowing whose sentence it was originally. June was loud and warm, and had a laugh that could turn a bad day around. She called Derek Vance a boy who wore his insecurity on the outside like a badge he was proud of. And then the photo went up. Someone had taken it from the road, the Holt property, the 4 mounds along the fence, the farmhouse behind them going gray from weather. Someone had written Sawdust Girl's estate across the bottom in thick black marker and taped it to the bulletin board outside the gym. Lena saw it at 7:50 in the morning. June was standing right next to her. Lena looked at the photo, then at June. June looked at the floor. Not at Derek, who was 3 meters away pretending to check his phone. Not at the photo. Not at Lena. The floor. And she kept looking at it. Lena waited. Maybe 5 seconds. Maybe less. Maybe forever. And then she turned and walked to the office and reported it herself. The photo came down by third period. She never asked June why. June never explained. The friendship didn't end in a fight. It ended in a quiet. A Tuesday quiet. An ordinary hallway quiet. The kind where one person keeps waiting for the other to cross back over some invisible line, and the other person never does. June started sitting somewhere else at lunch. Neither of them said a word about it. Lena ate alone, read during lunch, pretended she had chosen this, because choosing it hurts less than having it chosen for you. It was a Thursday in October. She needed rope from the equipment shed. Simple errand. 5 minutes. Except the shed had not been properly organized since her father died, and what had once been a system was now an archaeology. Things drifted to where they'd ended up, not where they belonged. The rope was somewhere behind the oil containers, and the old seed trays and the set of fence posts that had been in the corner since 2002. She was moving a stack of containers when her hand caught something. A hinge. Cold metal. Hidden behind everything else. She stopped. Reached back further. Pulled out a tin box. Olive drab paint going rust at the corners. Lid stuck. She worked the edge with her thumbnail until it gave with a small pop, like something that had been sealed a long time. Inside, a notebook. Brown leather cover. Worn at the corners the way things get worn when they've been carried somewhere often. Her father's name on the inside front page in his own handwriting. Hugh R. Holt. Below that, a date, September 2003. The shed had one small window, and the afternoon light was coming through it at an angle that made the dust in the air look like something suspended. Lena sat down on the concrete floor. Cold. Immediate. Didn't matter. The first entry was about soil pH. 5.9 in the northwest corner. Too acidic. He'd been planning to lime it the following spring. The handwriting was his. She knew it instantly. The precise small letters of a man who thought carefully before he wrote. She kept reading. He had been watching the mounds. Quietly. Without telling anyone. Between shifts at the mill and everything else a man carries, when he's trying to keep a farm working, Hugh Holt had been paying attention to the sawdust piles that the trucks dumped against his fence. He'd written about the color changes at different stages, the texture after rain, the smell in high summer versus after first frost. He had been cataloging it the way you catalog something you believe is important, the way you write things down when you intend to come back to them. And then she found the entry. October 14th, 2004. Pushed my hand into the base of the oldest pile today. South end against the fence. Warm. Not sun warmth overcast 3 days straight. This is coming from inside. Something is happening in there. I need to find out more. CN ratio, look into this. She read it twice. Slowly both times. October. South end. Warm from inside. She was in October. Same field. Standing in actual sight of the same fence. Her father had felt this. 1 year before the conveyor belt failed, he had noticed the exact thing she had been half noticing for 2 full years, without ever quite reaching it. He had written it down in precise small letters. He had made himself a note. He had written, look into this, like a man who fully intended to follow up. And then there was no more time. The notebook had no entries after early March 2005. She turned every remaining page. Blank. All of them blank. 40 pages of nothing waiting for a man who stopped coming back to fill them. Lena sat on the cold floor for a long time. Not crying. Not calm either. Something between those two things that doesn't have a clean name. The light shifted. The dust moved. The cold came up through the concrete into her legs and she let it. Eventually she stood up. She went inside. Found her own pen, a blue ballpoint from the kitchen junk drawer. Came back to the shed. Hooked on the work light she'd installed herself 2 summers ago, when Vera stopped being able to do the summer inventory alone. She opened the notebook. To the page after her father's last entry. The first blank page. She wrote the date. October 2007. Her handwriting was different from his looser faster, the handwriting of someone who writes to keep up with thinking, rather than to slow it down. But she used the same notebook. The same pages, the continuation of the same thought, same pile, same fence, same warmth. Starting from here. She didn't know what she was starting. Not in any complete way. She had no training, no expertise, no real understanding of what CN ratio meant beyond the letters themselves, but her father had seen something true, and she was not going to let it stay unfinished on a page in a locked tin box in the corner of a cold shed. She started at the library. The Timmins Public Library was modest in its science holdings, and not particularly aimed at 16-year-olds interested in agricultural chemistry. But it had what it had, and there was a teacher named Mr. Baird who ran the school science lab and had a university database login and was on some level curious what this very quiet girl would do if handed access to it. She did not disappoint. Sawdust, she learned, is not what it looks like. It looks like waste. It looks like the leftover nothing of a useful process, the dust at the bottom, the material too fine and inconsistent to be worth anything. A mid-sized timber mill generates 20 to 40 tons of it per week. Most of it gets landfilled, burned, or in arrangements like Northgate's informally deposited on nearby land where nobody is watching closely enough to care. Except, inside a sawdust mound, something else is happening. Organic carbon at the right moisture level in the presence of the right microbial activity begins to transform. Not slowly in the way that nothing seems to change. Actively. The microbes breaking down the cellulose and lignin generate heat. Biological heat. The same basic process that makes a compost pile warm is happening inside those pale yellow mounds, but on a larger scale and with the specific chemistry of wood fiber, which is high in carbon and low in the nitrogen that living systems need to function. That imbalance, that carbon-to-nitrogen ratio, that was what her father had found, and not yet named. She found the name, CN ratio, 25 to 30 parts carbon for every 1 part nitrogen by weight. Get it right and the pile heats to sustained temperatures, 50 degrees Celsius, 60. The microbes thrive. The material breaks down into something dark and crumbly and dense with the chemistry that makes soil productive. Get it wrong and the pile either just sits, or worse, it actively steals nitrogen from the surrounding environment during breakdown, locking it up where plants cannot reach it. She wrote this in the notebook. All of it. In the margins on the lines across the backs of pages she'd added to the original, and she thought this is what he meant. Look into this. This is the answer he was moving toward. By spring 2008, she was ready to test it. She was 17. 2 rows of potatoes. Northwest section, worst soil on the farm. A thin layer of partially broken down sawdust from the oldest mound, which she had turned and added grass clippings to and believed was ready. She was wrong. The plants came up 6 weeks later. Pale. Stunted. Wrong in a way you can see from 20 feet away before you even get close enough to diagnose it. Nitrogen starvation. She had applied the sawdust at the wrong stage. The microbial decomposition still active in the material was consuming the available nitrogen in the soil faster than the plants could access it. She had read the timing correctly in theory and applied it incorrectly in practice. Because theory and practice are not the same thing. And that gap is only crossable by making exactly the kind of mistake she had just made. She pulled the plants, dug out the layer of sawdust, turned the soil, wrote it all down, lost the section for the season. Vera said nothing. She just moved quietly around the kitchen that evening, putting dinner on the table, and didn't say anything, and the not saying was almost more significant than anything she could have said out loud. Lena ate dinner, washed her bowl, went back to the notebook, not because she felt like it, because she had made an error, and the error had a cause, and the cause was findable, and finding it was the only way any of this moved forward. The cause was timing, verifiable, correctable. She found it, and she kept going. In the second half of grade 12, Derek found something that worked better than the photo. What worked better was an audience. Specifically, the audience that gathered in the parking lot after school, which was where Derek had apparently decided to establish what he considered his social legacy. She heard about it from 3 different people in 1 week. The version had evolved. Now it was about environmental liability, about how the Holt farm was basically a dump site, about how it was only a matter of time before someone made an official complaint. He had concerns. He had noticed things. He was really just trying to help. He wasn't trying to help. He was a boy who had found a story he could control, and he was telling it wherever there was an audience. The thing about Derek was that he was smart enough to make cruelty look like concern. That is a particular skill, and a particularly exhausting one to be on the receiving end of. Lena heard the versions, second-hand, third-hand, once from a text accidentally sent to the wrong person by someone who spent the rest of the week avoiding her eyes in the corridor. She did not react, which was the thing that bothered Derek most. She could tell, because there was a slight recalibration whenever she didn't respond, a reset, a search for the next angle. She had clocked it, the way she clocked most things, quietly, without announcing the observation. She didn't have time to be angry. She was too busy solving the nitrogen problem. But June was a different kind of hard, because with Derek you at least knew where you stood. He had made his position clear and committed to it. You could work around it the way you work around a bad section of road. You know it's there. You go a different way. June was everywhere and nowhere. Same school, same occasional room, just not the same anymore in the ways that had mattered. She had drifted into a different orbit, which was not her fault exactly, which was also not her fault, which was the part that made it complicated. The friendship had ended in a quiet, and quiet endings are strange to grieve because there is no clear moment of ending. There is only the growing realization that you have been alone for a while now, and were the last to name it. Lena named it that winter. Alone at the kitchen table at 11 at night with the notebook open and a mug of tea gone cold beside her. She wrote 2 lines in the margin and then crossed them out so hard the pen nearly went through the page. And then she turned to a new page. And she kept going. September 2009. She found a notice in one of the agricultural journals. Soil Health Symposium in Sudbury. 2 days. Speakers from provincial offices, land remediation consultants. And on the second morning, a soil scientist from the University of Sudbury, Dr. Naomi Carr, who had published 3 papers in the previous year on organic matter remediation in degraded northern Ontario farmland. 3 papers, every one of which Lena had read twice and written notes in the margins of, until there was no margin left. She was 18. She asked Vera about the bus fare. Vera looked at the notice, looked at her daughter, looked at the notice again. How much? I can cover it from the market money. Tuesday morning bus, back by Wednesday night. She packed both notebooks, the Saskatchewan comparison data she had compiled, thermal readings dating back to fall 2007, 14 pages of handwritten analysis she had rewritten twice, because the first version was too messy to follow. The bus took 4 hours, northern Ontario moving past the window going gold and rust in the way it does in September before you're ready for it to go gray again. The conference was in a hotel meeting room, carpet cleaner smell, burnt coffee, catering table with $4 sandwiches she didn't touch, maybe 80 people, mostly older, mostly men, government consultants in fleece vests, with institutional lanyards, a few farmers who looked like they'd been made to come. Lena was the youngest person in the room by a significant margin. She sat in the back. She took notes. She ate a granola bar she'd brought from home and drank the free coffee, even though it tasted like cardboard that had made a poor decision. On the second morning, Dr. Naomi Carr stood up to present, mid-40s, dark hair back, the kind of speaker who doesn't need slides to get the point across but uses them anyway because other people need the structure. She moved through the material without filler, without apology, like someone who has thought about this for so long that presenting it is just a translation exercise from internal to external concepts already fully formed. Lena waited for the coffee break, stood up, walked to the front. Carr was sorting notes, glanced up. Professional smile, ready to receive a compliment and redirect to the next thing on her schedule. She was not ready for what came next. "I have a question about the phosphorus retention data in your 2008 paper." Lena said it the way she said most things, direct. No preamble, no apologetic softening. Section 3. The vermicast application accelerated humic acid formation faster than the control group, but the paper doesn't explain the mechanism. "I have a hypothesis about microbial diversity across decomposition stages, but I'm not sure my data supports it yet." Carr stopped sorting, actually looked at her, took in the age, the worn jacket, the 2 notebooks under her arm. "How old are you?" 18. "Who sent you?" "No one. I came on the bus." A beat. "What's in the notebooks?" They sat in the corner of the conference room. The break ended. The next session started without either of them in it. Neither moved. Lena talked about the mounds. She talked about the October temperature readings across 2 winters. She talked about the failed potato experiment, specifically about what she had done wrong, and why, because the error was as important as the correction. She talked about the CN adjustments, the thermal profiles, the northwest corner worst soil on the property, and the slow, barely visible shift she had been watching there since the first test batches went in. She showed Carr both notebooks. Carr read without speaking. She read Hugh's handwriting in the original notebook, the careful small letters, the soil pH notes, the patient catalog of seasonal changes, and the October 14th entry, center of pile, not sun warmth, from inside, CN ratio. Look into this. She turned the page, read the entry in different ink, looser handwriting, a different hand, same pile, same fence, same warmth, starting from here. October 2007. Carr was quiet, for long enough that it meant something. When she looked up, her expression had changed. Something more careful, like she was deciding not just what to say, but in what order. "I'm going to send samples from your site to the lab," she said finally. "All of the mounds." "All right," said Lena. "All of them." She said it again, deliberately, like she needed Lena to hear the emphasis. Something in the weight of those 2 words. Something Lena couldn't quite read yet, but filed away with the precision she applied to everything she filed away. "Send me your full documentation," Carr continued. "Temperature logs, visual timeline, the Saskatchewan comparison you mentioned. I want to see the reasoning, not just the numbers. What about the humic acid hypothesis?" Carr looked at her. "I think you've been doing this for 2 years without formal training, without institutional support, without anyone telling you it was worth doing. And you understand more about what's happening in your soil than most people I present to at these events." A pause. "Send me the data." Lena took the Tuesday evening bus home. 4 hours back through northern Ontario in the dark. She opened both notebooks on her knees. She thought about her father writing "look into this" in October 2004. The specific promise in those 3 words, the intent packed into that small imperative. Follow up. Come back to this. Don't let this slip. He had run out of time before he could. She wrote in the margin of the second notebook, "Dr. Naomi Carr, University of Sudbury, sending all samples. She knows something she isn't saying yet." Read her face when she saw the notebooks. She saw both of them together and something changed. She paused. Then northwest corner still responding. Thermal readings holding. Something is already working. Soil is doing this without me. Now I just have to not get in the way. She looked at that last line. Added below it in smaller letters, the way you write something meant for only yourself. Dad found the CN answer. It was 25-1. You were 6 months away from it. I'm not going to let the 6 months matter. The farm was dark when she got back. Vera's car in the drive. Kitchen light on. Lena pushed open the back door and the warmth came at her immediately. the warm food smell of a house that had been cooking the specific warmth of the only person who still lived here being present inside it. Vera was at the kitchen table, papers in front of her, but not the grocery lists, not the bookkeeping that usually spread across half the table by Wednesday evening. Something else. Documents with official headings, numbers and columns, the kind of paperwork that does not belong in a farmhouse kitchen and knows it. Vera gathered them the moment the door opened. Quickly, too quickly, folder closed, hands flat, smile assembled and ready by the time she looked up. "How was Sudbury?" "Good." Lena set her bag down, kept her eyes on the folder. "I talked to Naomi Carr, the soil scientist you mentioned. She's sending samples." "That's good." Vera stood, moved to the stove. "Are you hungry? There's leftover soup." "I'll get it." She ladled soup into the blue bowl with the chip in the rim, the same one she'd used since she was small. She stood at the counter and ate slowly, looking at the window, the dark outside, the line of mounds barely visible against the sky, and in the window's reflection, her mother, moving too efficiently, wiping the counter that didn't need wiping, adjusting the dish rack that was already even, the practiced movements of someone giving her hand something to do so her face doesn't have to work as hard. Lena did not ask about the folder. Not tonight, because she knew the shape of this. She had seen her mother carry something before and say nothing, had watched Vera absorb difficulty quietly, the way you absorb something you don't think you have the right to put down in front of other people. But this felt different, bigger. The folder had had a bank logo on the top right corner. She had caught just a fraction of it before Vera's hand covered the page. She finished the soup, rinsed the bowl. "Night, Mom." "Sleep well." She went to her room, sat on the edge of the bed, opened the second notebook, wrote the date. And below it, Mom had papers she didn't want me to see. Bank papers. She moved too fast when I came in. She's been carrying something she hasn't said. Has been for a while, I think longer than tonight. I don't know how long. I don't know how much. A pause. She looked at the line. I wonder if this is why the farm has felt like it's been holding its breath for 2 years. Not just grief, something else, something with numbers attached. She closed the notebook, lay back, looked at the ceiling. Outside in the dark, the 4 mounds stood along the fence in a row, warm at the center, alive with something her father had seen first, transforming the way things transform when you give them time and the right conditions and stop asking them to hurry. She had continued from the page he'd left blank. She was going to keep continuing, whatever was in that folder, whatever the number was, whatever Vera had been quietly carrying alone in this farmhouse while Lena was in the shed running temperature readings. She would find out, and she would not let any of it be the thing that stopped this. Because her father had written look into this like a man who believed the looking would be worth it. And she believed it too. Whatever came next, she believed it too. The lab results took 3 weeks. Lena knew this because she counted. Not in a dramatic way, not obsessively. Just she knew. The way you know how many days since something important happened, when you're waiting for what comes next. 22 days. She kept working during those 22 days, because standing still was not an option she had ever been able to locate. She adjusted the CN ratios on the 2 newest mounds, added more grass clippings, turned the second pile by hand with a pitchfork she'd sharpened twice in 2 months, took temperature readings every 3 days, wrote them down. The northwest corner had done something that fall, something small, almost invisible, the kind of change that doesn't announce itself. It just arrives quietly and waits for you to notice it. The grass in that corner had been a different shade for 6 weeks, slightly, almost imperceptibly, like the difference between gray-green and actual green. The kind of difference you only see if you've been looking at the same patch of ground long enough to know what color it usually is. Lena had been looking at it for 2 years. She noticed. She took a photograph, added it to the folder behind the thermal logs, Wrote one line in the notebook. Northwest corner first visible response, October 2009. She didn't let herself feel too much about it yet, because she'd learned already from the potato disaster, from the failed timing, from every correction she'd had to make in the first 2 years, that early results want to make you believe in them completely. And complete belief before complete understanding is how people celebrate things that haven't finished yet. She waited for the results. She kept working. She did not sleep particularly well. The letter from Naomi Carr arrived on a Thursday morning. Lena was in the shed when Vera called from the back porch. Not a question, just her name. The specific 2-syllable way Vera said Lena when she needed her to come inside right now. She came inside. The envelope was on the table. Official university letterhead. Already open, Vera had opened it without thinking, or had thought, and decided or had wanted to know before she handed it over. Lena didn't ask which. She sat down. Read. The report was 4 pages. Dense. The kind of writing that has been revised into precision, where every word is doing something specific, and there is no extra. 5 of the mounds were clean. Organic material in various stages of decomposition. Microbial activity consistent with aerobic thermophilic breakdown. Carbon to nitrogen ratios approaching the target range in the oldest 2 mounds. Trace mineral content in expected parameters. And then page 3. Mound number 3. Lead. Cadmium. Both above safe threshold for agricultural use. Both consistent with chromated copper arsenate treatment residues, the kind of chemical process used on pressure-treated lumber. The kind of lumber that Northgate had been processing alongside raw timber for years, without separating the waste streams. The mound had been building since 2003. 6 years. She had turned it, measured it, adjusted its inputs with the same care she had given to all the others. She had been walking past it every morning for 2 years, believing it was the same as the rest. It was not the same. Lead and cadmium don't compost out. They don't transform with the right microbial inputs or the correct temperature range. They sit in the material, and they wait, and they transfer directly into the soil, and from the soil into whatever grows in it, and from that into whatever eats what grows in it. That mound was not recoverable, not for farming, not for anything edible, not for the purpose she had been working toward. 6 years of accumulation. Gone. She set the letter down, looked at the table, the chip in the rim of the blue bowl sitting on the drying rack, the calendar on the wall with Vera's shift schedule written in green pen, the window, the field beyond it, the 5, only 5 now, not 6 mounds she could work with. How many clean? She knew the answer. She had just read it. She said it anyway. 5. Vera, standing at the counter, said nothing. Carr had included a note at the end of the report, handwritten, not part of the official document. The contamination in Mound 3 is a Northgate liability issue, not yours. Document this. Keep the report. You may need it. The remaining 5 mounds show significant promise. Continue exactly as you have been. And then below that smaller, your data is better than most of what I see from funded projects. Don't stop. Lena read the handwritten note twice, folded it separately from the report, put it in the front of the notebook inside the cover next to her father's name. Then she stood up, went to the shed, got the pitchfork. Mound 3 needed to be flagged and isolated. She was not going to use it. She was not going to touch it. She was not going to let anyone else touch it. And she had 5 other mounds to get back to. So, 5 mounds. Fine. She could work with 5. The contamination report sat in a folder, labeled, filed, the way her father had labeled things in the shed, not because anyone asked him to, but because a person who respects their own work keeps it organized. Lena had inherited this, or absorbed it, or decided on her own. Hard to know sometimes where the inherited ends and the decided begins. She sent a copy to Carr with a 2-paragraph letter. She did not contact Northgate. Not yet. She didn't have enough yet. She understood this instinctively, even if she couldn't have named the reasoning completely. You don't walk into a fight with half the information. You wait until you know more than the other person expects you to know. Then you walk in. She was not ready to walk in, so she went back to the 5 clean mounds, and she kept going. Winter, 2009 into 2010, was the hardest stretch. Not dramatically hard. Not the kind of hard that makes a good story when you're in the middle of it. Just the specific low grinding difficulty of being 18 and doing something no one around you understands, and doing it mostly alone, in a northern Ontario winter, which is not a gentle season. Derek had graduated the spring before, gone into some kind of logistics work in Sudbury, someone said. The parking lot audience had dispersed without him. School was quieter in a way that should have felt like relief and mostly just felt like absence. The mounds needed monitoring even in cold months, especially then. Temperature drops affected the microbial activity in ways that could set back the decomposition timeline by weeks. She had rigged a system of buried thermometer probes that she could read from the surface, which had taken most of a weekend and considerable creative engineering, with materials she had mostly repurposed from the shed. She was not angry. She was busy, which is its own kind of answer. In the fall of 2010, the Aldrich farm became important in a way she hadn't expected. The nitrogen inputs needed supplementing. Kitchen scraps and grass clippings and the small amounts of manure she'd been sourcing from a farm on the other side of Timmins were not enough to balance the carbon ratios at the scale she was working at now. She needed more, consistent, local. The Aldrich farm was 2 properties over. She knew this, had always known this, had driven past it 200 times without stopping. She stopped. The Aldrich gate was a wooden one, painted green originally, now more of a suggestion of green. She knocked on the house door. An older man answered June's grandfather. She recognized him from elementary school pickups a decade ago. He didn't recognize her at first. When he did, something shifted in his face. Not unfriendly, just careful. "I'm working on a composting system," she said. "I need a regular supply of cattle manure. I can pay per load or barter with finished compost. It would benefit your soil." A pause. "How often?" "Once a week. Whatever you can spare." He looked at her, then at the truck she'd borrowed from the neighbor for the day, then back at her. "Tuesdays," he said. "Come around back." June was not home that day. Lena did not ask about her. Drove away with a truck bed of manure and the specific sensation of a door being neither open nor closed. Just there. She came back every Tuesday. June was never there on Tuesdays, which could have been coincidence. Could have been. Spring 2011. Lena was 20 years old. The kitchen table again. Except this time, Vera didn't try to gather the papers quickly. This time, she sat with them in front of her and waited for Lena to come home and sit down. The waiting was a different thing entirely. The waiting said, "I have been carrying this long enough that I am tired of carrying it alone." Lena sat. Vera slid the folder across. "Your father took a second mortgage in 2003, she said, "to buy the new tractor. I extended it twice after he died. The bank extended with me because," a pause, "because Hugh was well liked. Because small-town banks know the people they're dealing with. Because there had been goodwill to spend. I've run out of extensions." Lena looked at the number, the remaining balance. The interest accumulated. The column of deferred payments that had been deferring for 6 years. Then the line at the bottom, 24 months, after which the bank had the right to move on the property. She sat with that for a moment. 24 months. Which was, her brain did the math before she asked it, to the end of 2013. Not far, not nearly far enough. "How long have you known?" Lena asked. Vera was quiet. "Mom." 2 years. She'd had this folder since 2009, since before Sudbury, since before the lab results. She had been sitting with this number alone for 2 years while Lena was in the shed running temperature probes and counting thermometer readings and building something she hadn't told her daughter she might not have time to finish. Lena looked at the window, the field, the mounds, the northwest corner where something was finally quietly beginning to work. Then she looked back at her mother. Vera's face was doing something complicated. Guilt, relief, the specific exhaustion of a person who has been keeping something afloat by willpower alone and has just let someone else see how tired they are. "Okay," Lena said. "That was all. Just okay." She got up, went to the shed, stood in the cold for a while, looking at nothing in particular. Then she went back inside, found the notebook, opened it to a new page, wrote the date, wrote the number, wrote the deadline, wrote below it in her father's shorthand that had become her own 24 months. "Figure this out. Do not stop." She pinned the page to the wall above her desk, and she kept going. The earthworms arrived on a Thursday in March 2011. A box, perforated cardboard, weight of it more than she expected. She had ordered them from an agricultural supplier in Saskatchewan, Eisenia fetida red wigglers, the specific species recommended in 3 separate research papers for their efficiency in breaking down organic matter. Which sounds sterile when you say it like that. Less sterile when you are standing in the equipment shed at 6 in the morning, opening a box of 1,000 worms. She had built the beds herself over 2 weekends. Reclaimed wooden frames, drainage holes, bedding of moistened shredded cardboard and partially finished compost. She set them in 3 rows along the east wall of the shed, the same wall where the tin box had been, the one with the notebook inside. She thought about this briefly, and then she got to work. The worms processed organic material and produced vermicast, dark, dense, almost luxuriously rich in microbial life and plant-available nutrients, not compost in the standard sense, something further along, something the soil could use more directly. She had read the comparison numbers so many times she could recite them. Vermicast contained 5 times the available nitrogen of standard compost, 7 times the potassium, 14 times the calcium. She had built the system in the same space where her father had kept his tools. She thought he would have approved of the repurposing. She didn't say this out loud, but she thought it. She applied the first small batches to the northwest corner in late spring. Carefully, measured, she had mapped the section into a grid, 12 squares 4 meters each, and she tracked application rates and response times separately for each square. Not because anyone asked her to, because that was how you distinguished what worked from what almost worked, and almost working was not the same thing. By August 2011, 3 of the 12 squares in the northwest corner were doing something measurable. By October 9, by November, when the ground was going hard and she had to stop all 12, she photographed each square in the same light at the same time of day every 2 weeks. The change was not dramatic in any single photograph. You had to look at the earliest one and the latest one side by side. Then it was obvious. Then it was undeniable. The color, the texture, the way the ground held moisture after rain instead of letting it run off in sheets. She looked at those 2 photographs for a long time, put them side by side in the notebook, wrote 1 word under each. Before, after, 2012. She was 21, 5 years into this. The mounds were changing, not just internally, externally. The 2 oldest ones had settled and shifted into shapes that were no longer simply pile-shaped. The material had consolidated, dense, solid in a way the fresh mounds weren't. She had been adding to them with intentionality, not just dumping inputs on top, but layering, building. The way you build something you intend to last, rather than something you intend to move. Mound 5 and Mound 6 had grown tall enough that turning them by pitchfork was no longer efficient, not impractical, genuinely impossible at the height they'd reached. She stood in front of Mound 6 on a morning in June and looked at it. 6 meters, maybe 7. Too tall to turn the traditional way. So she started building inward instead, reinforcing the base, adding structural layering, wood chips as scaffolding between the organic inputs, creating airflow channels through the core to maintain oxygen levels for the microbes, essentially engineering the mound into a contained system rather than an open pile. She didn't do this because it would look like anything. She did it because the biology required it. And then she stepped back and looked at what it was becoming, the shape that emerged from structural necessity. Rounded, intentional, rising in tiers because the layering created tiers. A dome, not a mound, a dome. She stood there in the morning light, thought, went back to work. The morning she found the mushrooms, it was early October. The same month everything always seemed to happen on this farm. October had a specific light in northern Ontario, low, and angled the kind that catches detail that summer light flattens out. It made things vivid in a way that felt almost unfair, like the season was trying to show you everything before it buried it. She was checking Mound 4. Temperature reading. Normal. Airflow from the upper channels. Normal. Visual check of the surface material. And then she saw them. Mushrooms. Not one or two. Dozens. Clustered across the south-facing surface of the mound like something that had always been planning to be there. Dark caps. Tight and fresh, and completely definitively not planted by her. Shiitake. She recognized them from the agricultural supplier catalog she'd bookmarked 3 months ago when she'd started reading about fungal cultivation. She had not ordered any. She had not inoculated any logs, had not introduced any spore material, had not done anything that should have produced this. She crouched down, looked at the nearest cluster. The mycelium, the root structure, the white thread-thin network beneath the surface had threaded through the entire south face of the mound, establishing itself, making itself at home, using the cured wood fiber of the sawdust as substrate, the way shiitake mushrooms have used dead wood for thousands of years before anyone decided to cultivate them. The forest behind the east fence line was mixed pine and hardwood. The hardwood had mature trees with shelf mushrooms on their north sides. The spores had traveled. They had found the mound. They had found exactly what they needed. And they had moved in without asking. Lena sat down in the damp October grass. She sat there for a while, and then she reached into her jacket pocket, got the notebook, opened it to the back, found her father's last entry, October 14th, 2004. She had read it so many times she had it memorized, but she read it again. Pushed my hand into the base of the oldest pile today. Warm. Not from sun, from inside. Something is happening in there. I need to find out more. She turned to the next page. Her own handwriting. First entry, October 2007. Same pile, same fence, same warmth. Starting from here. She looked at that line. Starting from here. 5 years of starting from here. 5 years of wrong timings and contaminated mounds and crops that failed, and nitrogen ratios and freezing mornings and hands that were never completely clean, and neighbors who slowed their cars to look, and a mother carrying a secret in a folder for 2 years alone. 5 years. And the land had just done this, without her directing it, without her scheduling it. It had done exactly what it was prepared to do when the conditions were right. It had received what she built, and it had added something she hadn't asked for. She pressed the notebook against her knees, and she cried. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly in the way of someone who has been keeping everything moving for long enough that the momentum itself has become a kind of armor, and the armor is taking a moment off. The mushrooms were completely indifferent to this. They were just there. Being mushrooms, doing exactly what mushrooms do. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, got mud on her cheekbone, didn't notice, opened the notebook again, found the last entry her father had written. Below his words in her handwriting in the ink that was a different color, the continuation of the same thought across the space between them. She wrote October 2012. They came on their own. Shiitake south face of Mound 4. I didn't plant them. The spores found the substrate. You wrote if the wood is warm, something is already working. You were right, Dad. Something was already working. Something has been working this whole time. I just had to not get in the way. She closed the notebook, sat there a little longer, then stood up, dusted off her knees, and went to get a basket. because those mushrooms were not going to harvest themselves. She brought them to the Timmins Farmers Market on a Saturday morning in late October. 2 kilograms. Set out on a second-hand wooden tray with a handwritten sign she'd made on a piece of cardboard. Shiitake mushrooms, grown on organic compost, Holt Farm, Timmins. She stood behind the table. The market opened at 8. By 8:38 she had sold everything. Completely out. Gone. She had turned away 4 people in the last 3 minutes. She stood behind the empty tray. A woman in a winter coat paused in front of her, looked at the tray, looked at the sign, looked at Lena. "When do you have more?" "Next week." "I'll be back." She was, and she brought someone else. The week after that, the tray sold out in 20 minutes. The week after that, a restaurant owner from downtown asked if she could do wholesale. Then a second one. Then a catering company. Then a call from a grocery buyer in Sudbury, who had heard from someone who had heard from someone else. She did not say yes to all of it yet, because she didn't have the capacity yet. But she wrote down every name, and she kept building. The domes. It happened the way most important things happen, not as a plan, but as an answer to a problem. The oldest mounds had reached heights where conventional turning was impossible. She needed the biology to keep working, which meant the structure had to do what the turning would have done, move air through the core, create thermal gradients, maintain the conditions for decomposition. So she engineered it. Reinforced bases, layered inputs in spirals rather than horizontal sheets, built air channels from buried wood that would decay slowly and leave passages. She was not following anyone's design. She was solving a problem with the materials she had and the knowledge she'd accumulated, and the understanding that living systems need to breathe. The shapes that emerged were domes, not planned, not designed for appearance. Just what happened when you built something structurally sound out of organic material that was finding its own equilibrium. She added vine plugs to the south faces of the older ones, not for decoration, for insulation, cover, protection from temperature fluctuation. By the spring of 2012, someone driving on the highway slowed down to look, then stopped. She watched the car from the field. White, out-of-town plates. Sat there for maybe 2 minutes, then drove on. She went back to what she was doing. By spring 2013, 3 or 4 cars stopped every week. Someone took a photograph and posted it online with no label, just the image. 7 domes in a row, the Northgate Mill chimney visible on the horizon behind them like punctuation. She found out about the post from Mr. Baird, who had stayed in occasional contact. She looked at the comments. Is this a park? Some kind of art installation? Who built this? Has anyone been inside? She closed the browser, went to check the temperature readings. 2013 arrived the way bad news always does, not dramatically, but with the specific weight of something you already knew was coming. The wheat in the eastern section had done well that summer, really well. The soil report from that section came back with organic matter at 4.8%, up from below 2 in 2007. She had reread it enough times it could have been framed. The northwest corner, the worst piece of land on the property, was now in full production. And the bank sent a letter in September. Final notice, 3 months. She read it in the truck parked in the driveway. Engine off, mail in her lap. Then she went inside, went to her room. The tack on the wall held the page she'd pinned in 2011, the one she'd written the night Vera showed her the folder. 24 months. Figure this out. Do not stop. She looked at it. The paper had yellowed at the edges. The pen had gone slightly faded where she'd pressed harder on the important words. She took the bank letter, pinned it next to the old page, stood back, looked at both of them. Then she went to the kitchen and made 2 cups of tea, carried them both to the living room where Vera was sitting in the chair by the window that she'd always sat in and always would sit in reading a book she'd been on the same chapter of for 6 weeks. She set 1 cup on the table next to her. Vera looked at the cup, then at Lena. Bank sent a letter, Lena said. I know. I saw it in the stack. 3 months. Vera closed the book. Didn't say anything. Lena sat on the end of the couch. They sat in silence for a while. The way two people can sit in silence when they've lived in the same house long enough that silence isn't empty. It just means thinking. I need you to call them, Lena said finally. Not to beg. Not to ask for more time. Ask for a meeting. In person. Tell them we have financial information they haven't seen yet. Tell them the situation has changed. Vera looked at her. Has it? It's changing. That's what I need to show them. Another silence. Okay, Vera said, and she picked up her tea. The afternoon Derek Vance appeared at the gate was a Wednesday. Early October. Cold light. She was in the north field checking the moisture content on the compost supply mounds, the system she'd built for the restaurant and grocery accounts separate from the remediation mounds, working at a faster turnover rate. She heard the gate. Looked up. Derek was standing at it. Not inside. Standing at the gate, which was closed. She had not seen him up close in 4 years. He had graduated in the spring of 2009, same year she had, and gone to Sudbury for work. She knew this not because she'd tracked it, but because Timmins is a small enough town that information moves on its own. He looked different. Not older in the way of just turned years. Older in the way that happens when something has been taken from you that you didn't know you needed. She kept her distance, held the moisture probe. What do you need? She said. Not rude, just direct. He looked at the domes behind her, all 7 of them, towering, green, impossibly different from the pale mounds of waste she remembered from her own fence line growing up. I heard you sell at the market, he said. Mushrooms and produce. Wholesale now, some market. He looked at his hands, back at her. Vance Farm got foreclosed in August. He said it the way you say something you've had to say enough times that the words have gone flat from use. Dad's working at a supply place in Sudbury. I'm here. She stood still. I know I was... He stopped. I know what I was like. He didn't try to explain it. Didn't try to walk her through the reasoning behind the bulletin board photo and the parking lot comments, and the years of steady, quiet cruelty that had been the backdrop of her secondary school experience. Good. She didn't need him to. She already knew the reasoning. Scared kid. Powerful father. Easier to punch down than to figure out what he actually thought. Which is not an excuse. But it is an explanation. And Lena had always been better at working with explanations than holding on to points. She looked at him for a long moment, then at the gate, looked back at him. My dad worked at Northgate for 11 years, she said. Before the accident. You knew that. I knew. He was good at his job. He was the best person in that shed. Everyone said so. A pause. I'm sorry. About all of it. She stood there in the October cold, processing. There were things she could say, accurate things, true things, things she had written in notebook margins at 11 o'clock at night and then crossed out because they had nowhere useful to go, but the things she had learned from 5 years of working with soil that other people had written off. The thing the Northwest Corner had taught her, and the mushrooms had confirmed, was that deciding something is done is not the same as it being done. That things you've already counted as dead sometimes just need different conditions. She looked at Derek Vance standing at her gate. He was not asking for forgiveness exactly. He was asking for the gate to open. She went to the gate, unlatched it. 6 in the morning, she said. Don't be late. He wasn't. He came back the next morning at 5:57. Boots already broken in. She put him on mound turning. Didn't explain why she'd let him in. Didn't revisit the conversation. Just put him to work, which was in its own way the most complete answer she could give. October faded into November. The bank meeting was set for December. She spent the 2 months between the letter and the meeting pulling together everything she had. soil reports, thermal logs, sales records, the restaurant contracts, the grocery account agreements, the year-over-year financial data that Vera helped her format because Vera was, after all, a bookkeeper, and she had always known how to make numbers tell the right story. She had the contamination report on Mound 3. She had Dr. Carr's letter. She had the photographs, the before and after of the northwest corner, that told a story you couldn't argue with if you looked at them side by side. She put it all in a binder, tabbed, labeled, organized, the way her father labeled things in the shed, the way you organize something when you respect what it means. Vera drove them to the bank meeting in her old Subaru with the heater that took 7 minutes to warm up. They sat in the parking lot for those 7 minutes without speaking, steam on the windows, radio off. Then Vera looked at the binder in Lena's lap. "Your father would have done this differently," she said. "I know. He would have walked in there and tried to charm them. I know. It probably wouldn't have worked." Lena looked at the binder, then at her mother. "I'm not going to charm them," she said. "I'm going to show them numbers they've never seen from this property, and then I'm going to let the numbers do what numbers do." Vera almost smiled. He would have liked that better anyway. They got out, walked in. The numbers did what numbers do. The bank agreed to a 12-month extension with a structured review. 12 months, which was not a victory, but it was time, and Lena Holt knew exactly what to do with time. She had been learning that lesson since she was 16 years old. Standing in a cold October field, her hand pressed into the base of a sawdust mound, feeling the warmth that was already there, waiting for someone who understood what it meant. The clip was 47 seconds long. Someone had filmed it from the passenger seat of a moving car. Shaky, unplanned. The kind of video that starts because the person filming it doesn't know what they're looking at and wants to show someone else so they can figure it out together. The highway, gray sky, the mill chimney of Northgate timber visible in the background, sending its pale exhaust upward. And then the domes, all 7 of them, coming into frame slowly as the car moved. Massive, green, rising from the flat industrial landscape of northern Ontario, like something that had been placed there by a civilization that didn't leave other records. The person filming said nothing for the first 20 seconds. Then, very quietly, "What is that?" That was the whole video. 47 seconds. No label. No explanation. Posted on a Thursday night in early September with the caption, "Driving past Timmins. Can someone please tell me what I just saw?" By the following morning, it had 400 shares. By evening, 40,000. By the weekend, the number was moving too fast to track comfortably. The comments were extraordinary in their variety. Land art installation abandoned mid-project. I think it's a hobbit village. That's clearly some kind of archaeological site. My cousin lives near Timmins and she says it's a farm. Why is there a mill chimney right behind it? Is this on purpose? Someone is definitely living inside those things. I drove past this last summer and I still think about it. She had 7 of them. 7. Who builds 7? Lena found out about the clip from Derek. It was 6:30 Saturday morning. He was already on the property. He was always there before she was now, which had taken some getting used to. And he was standing at the south fence looking at his phone with an expression she hadn't seen on him before. Not quite alarmed, not quite amused. Something between the two that didn't have a clean name. "Someone filmed the domes from the highway," he said. He held the phone out. She watched the clip, watched it again, stood very still. "What is that?" She handed the phone back. Went to check the temperature readings on Dome 4. Because the temperature readings still needed checking. Because the clip being on the internet did not change the internal biology of Dome 4. Because the only rational response to your life becoming briefly visible to strangers was to continue doing the thing that made your life worth looking at in the first place. Except, by Sunday, the clip had passed 2 million views, and Marcus Elroy, who had been the general manager of Northgate Timber for 11 months, called his company's legal department at 8 o'clock Sunday morning. which Lena did not know yet. But she would. The phone rang on a Monday. She was in the processing shed, the small building she'd converted from the old grain store where the produce was cleaned and packed and labeled for the North Bay distributor. She had a system now. Derek on the field runs, 2 part-time workers from town on pack days, her own hands everywhere in between. She picked up on the 3rd ring. Lena. She knew the voice, stopped what she was doing. It had been 5 years since she'd heard June Aldrich say her name. 5 years of Tuesday manure pickups from the Aldrich farm where June was never there. 5 years of a door that was neither open nor closed. June. A pause. The kind of pause where both people are deciding at the same time whether to acknowledge the length of the silence or just start from where they are. They started from where they were. I saw the clip, June said. A lot of people did. I recognized the property before I recognized you. A beat. The domes. I drove past them last fall. I didn't know. I didn't realize it was you who built them. Lena said nothing. I'm managing the farm now, June said. My grandparents retired. The east section it's not good, Lena. The soil's been in corn for 12 years straight without rotation, and the organic matter is basically gone. And I've tried everything the extension office recommends and nothing is holding. Outside the processing shed window dome, 6 was visible against the September sky. Green even when summer was ending, because the vine cover protected the core temperature. How much of the east section? Lena said. 6 acres, maybe 7. How soon? I need a harvest by August or I lose the account. She did the math. 6 acres. September to August. 11 months. Tight. Not impossible. She had done harder things with less. Come Tuesday morning, she said. Bring your last 3 soil reports if you have them. Silence. Then, thank you. Come Tuesday. She hung up, stood at the window, looked at Dome 6, thought about June at 7th grade and the bulletin board and the floor, thought about Tuesday mornings at the Aldrich gate and the grandfather who opened the door and the absence that was always precisely where June should have been, thought about the northwest corner of the Holt farm, how it had looked in 2007, how it looked now. Things are not done when you decide they're done. She had learned that from the soil. She could apply it other places. Marcus Elroy called on a Wednesday in October. Direct line to the farm, which meant he had looked it up specifically, which meant he had not sent a letter or routed through an assistant or done any of the things a person does when they want to manage a situation from a distance. He called the direct line. Lena picked up. Ms. Holt. Professional. Precise. The voice of someone who had prepared what he was going to say and intended to say exactly that. My name is Marcus Elroy. I'm the general manager at Northgate Timber. I believe we have some matters to discuss regarding the arrangements between Northgate and your property. She waited. The original agreement in place between Northgate and your family was informal and undocumented, with the recent attention your property has received. He paused here. The slight pause of someone choosing words that sound neutral, but aren't. Northgate has a responsibility to ensure that industrial materials deposited on adjacent private land are properly accounted for. Still, she said nothing. He continued, I'd like to schedule a site visit, at your convenience, to discuss how we move forward in a way that's satisfactory to both parties. Both parties. She wrote those 2 words on the corner of the packing label she'd been filling in. You're welcome to visit, she said. Whenever you'd like. Thursday morning. Fine. 10 o'clock. I'll be here. She hung up, looked at the 2 words she'd written. Both parties. He thought there was a problem he was coming to manage. He did not know yet what he was actually walking into. She called Dr. Naomi Carr. Carr answered on the 2nd ring. They had kept in contact over the years, not constantly, but with the specific regularity of 2 people who respect each other's time and always have something worth saying when they reach out. Carr had sent updated research papers. Lena had sent soil reports and yield data and photographs of the northwest corner in 4-year intervals that together told a story even the most skeptical reader would have to sit with. "Northgate is coming Thursday," Lena said. "I know." Carr was quiet for a moment. "Their regional forestry office contacted me 6 weeks ago." The air in the room went still. "What?" "They're running a provincial reforestation program, mandatory thinned sections on their leased crown land from the 2011 fire damage. The first 2 years of planting had 28% survival rates." 28%. "The soil," Lena said. "The soil. Their nursery stock is healthy. Their technique is sound. But the receiving soil in the replanting zones is depleted below the threshold for root establishment in the first 2 growing seasons. They need a soil amendment. Organic matter content of at least 5%, specific microbial activity profiles. They've been sourcing from 3 suppliers, and none of them can meet both criteria consistently." Lena sat down, because she needed to sit down. She had built this farm on the assumption that she would have to fight for every inch, every account, every scrap of legitimacy. She had spent 7 years being the girl with the sawdust problem, the girl the town slowed down to look at, the girl whose property was a story people told as a curiosity or a complaint. And Northgate Timber, the company that had taken her father, the company that had been dumping industrial waste on her fence line since before she was born. That company had spent 6 weeks contacting the soil scientist who had Lena's data in her files, looking for exactly what Lena had, without knowing it yet. "He doesn't know, you know," Lena said. "No," Carr said. "He called me as a research reference. He told me what they needed. I told him I might know a source and I'd follow up." A pause. "I wanted to tell you first." "Why?" "Because it changes the conversation, and you deserve to walk in knowing what the conversation actually is." Lena sat with that for a moment. Then, "Send me the specifications, what they need, organic matter thresholds, microbial profiles, tonnage per season." "Already sent. Check your email." She checked. 4 attachments, the specifications, a provincial forestry report on the reforestation project, survival rate data year over year, and a soil test comparison, what Northgate's nursery program needed versus what 3 commercial suppliers had been providing. She read it all that night, took her time, made notes in the margin of the notebook, her handwriting next to her father's handwriting the way it had always been since October 2007. 2 different hands, the same thought continuing across the years. She wrote, "He's coming to end this. He doesn't know he's coming to continue it." Then smaller. "The land did this, not me. I just didn't get in the way." Thursday morning, 6 o'clock. She checked Dome 7 first, the tallest one. Wind reading from the northeast good. Temperature gauge at the upper monitoring point read 51. Stable. The vine cover on the south face had done exactly what she'd needed it to do through the cold nights. Green all the way up. Dense. Alive. She stood on the top of it for a few minutes, the way she did every morning. The mill chimney of Northgate was visible from up here, 200 meters. Close enough that on still days she could hear the equipment. Her father had walked that distance 5 days a week for 11 years, had known every person in that facility by name, had been the best man in the shed by multiple accounts, none of which had ever been said to her officially. She looked at the chimney, looked at the domes, looked at the fields, all of them, the full property, 34 acres in active production, the northwest corner unrecognizable from its 2007 state, the mushroom beds behind the east shed, the 2 high tunnels she'd built in 2012 and the 3rd she'd added last spring. She climbed down, went inside, changed her boots, washed her hands, made coffee. Did not change her clothes, because she was not going to change her clothes, because this was her farm, and she worked here and she was not performing anything for anyone. He arrived at 9:58, company SUV, clean, The kind of vehicle that never gets mud on it because it's always parked in a designated space with a sign. Marcus Elroy stepped out. Suit jacket, company folder, a legal letter. She could see the shape of it in his breast pocket folded into thirds. He was 34. She knew this from the company website she'd looked at after the phone call, the same way she looked everything up methodically before she walked into anything. He looked at the farm, then at her, and then apparently something about the combination struck him as funny, because he started laughing. Not a small laugh, a sustained one, the kind that fills up the silence between two people and says without words, "I know what this is. I've already decided. I don't expect to be surprised." 30 seconds. She let him finish. "Let me get this straight," he said, wiping the corner of his eye, still smiling, still completely certain of the ground under his feet. "You actually called me out here, to this property, in October, to tell me I cannot stop the sawdust deliveries because the sawdust is valuable." She didn't move, didn't shift her weight, didn't look away. "I didn't call you here about the sawdust," she said, the way you say something when the other person doesn't yet understand that the conversation has already been decided. "I called you here to show you what I built." She pushed the gate open, stepped back, waited. He walked through and stopped. 7 domes, 8 meters, tiered, structured with the intention of something designed to last, green from base to crown, alive, rising from the flat Ontario farmland behind a working mill chimney with the absolute certainty of something that belongs exactly where it is. He didn't understand what he was looking at. She could tell, because his expression did the thing faces do when the eye sends information that the brain hasn't yet filed in any existing category. A blankness, not stupidity, recalibration. She gave him time. She was good at giving things time. He turned to her. "What am I looking at?" "Compost, in structural form. Those are compost piles. Those are 7 years of work." He looked at them again, then at the field beyond, the high tunnels, the processing shed, the worn path between the east shed and Dome 4 where the mushroom harvest moved twice a week. "How big is the operation?" "Come see." She walked. He followed. She didn't explain. She just showed. The high tunnels first, 3 of them running along the south edge, each one 40 meters. Tomatoes, greens, herbs' year-round production she'd developed over 3 growing cycles until the climate consistency was reliable. She pulled the door of the first tunnel open. The warmth hit immediately. That specific greenhouse warmth, humid green, the smell of living soil. He stepped in, looked down the length of it. She could see him calculating, without the spreadsheet open. Just his brain doing what MBA brains do when they encounter scale. She had seen this before the banker who reviewed the farm extension, the distributor rep from North Bay, who came for the first meeting and left 3 hours later with a year contract. The specific recalibration of someone who prepared for one version of a conversation and arrived at another. "How many restaurants?" he said. 11. 2 grocery chains. A regional school board food program. "Wholesale or retail?" "Both. Annual revenue." She told him. He didn't laugh. Then the mushroom barn. She had converted the largest outbuilding climate-controlled, humidity-managed growing shiitake and oyster and lion's mane on substrate. She produced herself from the dome system. 7 tons annually now. A waiting list of specialty buyers in Sudbury and North Bay that she managed with a spreadsheet and a phone. Then, the compost operation. 6 processing bays. Organic inputs from 14 restaurants, 2 grocery chains, a school board food program, and a municipal diversion contract she'd won the previous year. The city of Timmins was paying her to take the organic waste that used to go to the landfill. She paused beside Bay 3. He looked at the labeled dividers, the input records posted on the wall, the temperature logs in plastic sleeves. "You track all of this yourself?" "Me and 2 staff." She handed him the soil binder without comment. He took it, stood there in the processing bay, and read. Soil organic matter reports. Before and after. Northwestern section 2007 and 2014 side by side. Below 2% to above 7. Certified by a university lab. Signed by Dr. Naomi Carr. He turned pages. She waited. She was very good at waiting. The contamination report, he said. He had reached page 11. The Mound 3 analysis. Lead in cadmium. Consistent with chromated copper arsenate from pressure-treated lumber processing. Northgate's processing. Their waste stream. Their mound. I documented it in 2009, Lena said. Filed with the Provincial Environmental Office in 2010. They have it on record. A long pause. You didn't contact us. I didn't have enough yet. He looked up. You've been building a case. I've been building a farm, she said. The case is just what happened around it. He closed the binder. They stood in the processing bay. Cold morning light coming through the south window. Somewhere outside, Derek was running the thermal check on Dome 5. She could hear the faint rhythmic sound of his boots on the gravel path. Elroy was quiet. The laugh was completely gone. She had watched it leave, had tracked its exit through the high tunnels and the mushroom barn and the soil reports and the contamination documentation. It had started leaving around page 3 of the binder and had finished leaving somewhere around the organic matter comparison table. What is it you want? He said finally. She took the binder back. Walk with me. She led him to the back of the property, the east fence line, the far end, where in 1997 the first trucks had backed through the gap in the chain link and dumped the first loads of pale yellow sawdust. The gap in the fence was gone. In its place, a row of planted spruce that she'd put in over the winter of 2011, using seedlings she'd grown herself in the east shed. 7 trees now dense enough to be a windbreak. The ground underneath them was dark, loose. It smelled like rain, even when it hadn't rained. She stopped. This is where it started, she said. He looked at the ground, then at the trees, then at the farm behind him, all of it visible from this angle, the domes and the tunnels and the processing shed and the fields running green and ordered and purposeful in every direction. She let him look, because she wanted him to understand the full distance, from the pale mounds of 1997 to this, from $40 a week and look away to this. She wanted him to hold both ends of that distance in his mind at the same time, not as guilt, just as geography. Northgate's reforestation program, she said. He went still. You've had 2 years of 28% survival rates. Your nursery stock is healthy. Your technique is sound. The problem is receiving soil. Organic matter below threshold. Microbial activity too low for first-season root establishment. You've been sourcing from 3 commercial suppliers, and none of them can meet your specifications consistently. The stillness on his face had become something else, something that looked almost like being found out, without malice. Just the specific feeling of discovering that someone else has been doing their homework longer than you realized. Dr. Naomi Carr, he said quietly. She told me you'd contacted her. She told me what you needed. He looked at the soil reports binder under her arm, then at the dark ground under the spruce trees. You have what we need. I have exactly what you need. How much? Enough for your first 2 zones this season. More by next year if we formalize the arrangement now and adjust my production schedule. He turned away from her briefly, looked out at the highway, the clean line of it, the normal Ontario morning going past, trucks, commuters, the ordinary world that had no idea. Turned back. What do you want in exchange? She had thought about this for 3 days, not the logistics. The logistics were straightforward. She had written the terms in 2 columns in the notebook. Supply quantities, delivery specifications, pricing per ton, revenue projections. She had the numbers clean and ready. That part was easy. The other part was harder to know how to say. But she had learned from 7 years of working with things other people had decided were finished, that the important things were worth saying precisely, even when precision was uncomfortable, especially then. "The supply arrangement is standard," she said. "You provide milled sawdust in the grades I specify as a purchased raw material at fair market rate. I supply soil amendment for your reforestation program at a tiered pricing structure based on volume. We formalize the delivery arrangement in writing. The informal agreement ends. Everything goes on paper." "Agreed." "That's not everything." He waited. She looked at the spruce trees along the east fence. "Hugh Holt worked at Northgate Timber for 11 years, she said. "He was the best person in that shed. Multiple people who worked with him said so. He died in a preventable accident on your equipment, and the company sent flowers and a check and a letter of apology that covered none of the actual cost of what was lost." Elroy said nothing. "The Provincial Reforestation Program," she said. "When it's registered, when the plaques go up at the planting zones, the program carries his name. The Hugh Holt Reforestation Initiative. Registered. Official. Permanent." Silence. Long enough that she counted it. Long enough to mean something. "That's not a financial ask," he said finally. "No. That's not standard. No. I'll need to go to the board. I know. I'm not asking for this week." He stood there in the October cold, looking at the spruce trees her father never saw, the ground that had come back from nothing, the farm that had been built from what his company had treated as disposable. She watched him make the decision. She didn't push, because she had learned from the Northwest Corner and the mushrooms and the lab results and the bank meeting that you can prepare everything and create all the right conditions. But the final growth happens on its own timeline. You can't rush it. You just have to not get in the way. "All right," he said. 2 words. She heard them land. "I'll need the supply specifications in writing by end of week," he said. "I'll have legal draw up the formal agreement. The name I'll take it to the board with a recommendation to approve." "That's enough." He extended his hand. She shook it. Firm. Brief. The handshake of 2 people who understand what they've just done and are not going to dress it up with anything additional. He walked back toward the gate. She stayed at the fence line, watched him go. The company SUV doors closed. Engine started, pulled out, gone. She stood alone at the back of the property. The spruce trees, the dark ground, the smell that was there even in October. Something like rain. Something like time, something she had been breathing since 2007 and still did not have a complete word for. She opened the notebook, turned to the last entry she had written. "He's coming to end this. He doesn't know he's coming to continue it." Below that, she wrote, October 2014, Partnership Agreement, Northgate Timber, Soil to Forest Loop, Supply Arrangement Formalized, Hugh Holt Reforestation Initiative. Board vote pending. She paused, then smaller. The handwriting she used for things meant only for herself, Dad. "I made them say your name. The formal agreement was signed in December. 2 lawyers reviewed it before she put pen to paper. The terms were exactly what she'd laid out at the fence line. Sawdust as purchased raw material, tiered pricing on soil amendment supply, full formalization of the delivery arrangement. The informal 1997 deal officially ended. The contaminated mound 3 Northgate's liability formally acknowledged was remediated at their cost. The space it left was replanted with spruce seedlings from the east shed, which was not in the agreement but felt like the right thing to do. The board vote on the Hugh Holt Reforestation Initiative came back in January. Approved. She told Vera on the phone. Pulled over on the shoulder of the North Bay Highway when the email came through and just called home. Vera picked up on the first ring. "They approved it," Lena said. A silence. "Mom." "I heard you." Vera's voice had gone somewhere very quiet. "Hugh Holt Reforestation Initiative. Permanent plaques. All 4 planting zones." Another silence. "He would have hated having his name on a plaque." "I know. He would have been proud of you for getting it." They stayed on the line without talking for a while, which was its own language, which they had always spoken. June Aldrich came on the first Tuesday of February, exactly as she'd said she would. Boots she'd clearly borrowed from someone else because they were slightly too large, a folder of soil reports she'd printed at the library because the farm printer had been broken for 2 months. She drove through the gate and got out of the truck and stood in the driveway looking at the domes, all 7 of them, which from the driveway in winter were genuinely something between a medieval earthwork and a living hill, and a proof of something nobody had asked to be proven. Lena came out of the processing shed. They looked at each other. 5 years of distance in the air between them. 5 years of Tuesday mornings at the Aldrich gate and the absence that was always precisely where June should have been. June held up the folder. "I brought the reports." "I see them." A pause. "I'm sorry," June said, not elaborating, not explaining, just, "I'm sorry," which was a long time coming, and it was not nothing. Lena looked at her, looked at the domes, looked at the east field where the soil had come back from gray sand to something that held its shape after rain. Things are not done when you decide they are done. "Come on," she said. "I'll show you the system." They walked. June asked good questions. She had been managing the Aldrich farm for 2 years and had done her own reading and was not starting from zero. By noon, they had walked the whole property. By 2 o'clock, they had drafted a plan for the Aldrich East section. By 4, without deciding to, without scheduling it, they were sitting on the tailgate of June's truck with coffee from the thermos June had brought, talking about the market and the specialty produce June wanted to trial, and the grandfather who had opened the gate every Tuesday without question, talking the way they used to. Not the way you pick up something after 5 years and try to remember how it went. The way it just resumed. The way things sometimes do when they were never really done, just interrupted. Not perfectly, not without the weight of the years, but talking, which was a beginning. Later that afternoon, Vera walked the farm, which she did on Friday evenings when the week was finished. Had started doing it the previous spring when the second high tunnel was producing consistently, and the fear had finally gone somewhere quieter. Not gone entirely, never entirely, but less present at the kitchen table. She walked through the first high tunnel, touching leaves, the way she always touched things, not like a supervisor looking for problems, like someone reminding herself something is real. Lena walked beside her. They didn't talk much. They came to the mushroom barn, the largest of the converted spaces, climate-controlled, humming with the specific quiet of a system working exactly as intended. Lena turned on the interior light. The mushroom beds ran the full-length shiitake and oyster and lion's mane, the white and gray and coral and brown, of something alive and deliberate, built from exactly what had been written off as nothing. Vera stood at the entrance, looked down the length of it, her hand on the doorframe, the way it had been on the greenhouse door 2 springs ago, the way she touched things when she needed to know they were real. "Your dad would have loved this," Vera said. Her voice had gone somewhere quiet. Lena looked at the beds, at the dark substrate, the clusters of caps pushing through, the mycelium threads you couldn't see but knew were there running through everything, connecting everything, the network that made all of it possible. "He thought of it first," she said. "The warm pile, the transformation. He saw it before I did." Vera was quiet. "I know," she said finally. They stood there, the mushroom barn humming, the February cold pressing against the corrugated roof. 7 domes standing in the dark outside, warm at their centers, alive with something that did not need to be witnessed to continue working. Vera turned to her daughter, and for a moment she looked at her the way she used to look at things on the farm, the specific look of a woman who has spent enough years watching something grow from almost nothing that she has earned the right to be undone by it. Lena met her eyes, didn't say anything, because some things don't need saying. She reached over, took her mother's hand. They stood in the doorway of the mushroom barn in the dark, 2 women and everything between them, everything gone and everything remaining, A farm that had been failing, and a man who hadn't finished, and a girl who had been 16 years old with cold hands and borrowed library books, and one line written in a notebook that she'd meant as a beginning and turned out to mean something much larger. Same pile, same fence, same warmth. Starting from here. This story is not about money. The money is real. The contracts are real. The soil reports, the restaurant accounts, the reforestation program, the distribution deal that expanded to 4 municipalities by the following year, all of it real. But none of that is the story. The story is about a girl who pushed her hand into the base of a sawdust pile in October 2007 and felt warmth where everyone else saw waste, and then found her father's handwriting telling her he had felt it first, and decided that the space between his last word and the blank page that followed was not an ending. It was a continuation waiting for someone to pick up the pen. Most of what the world calls waste is not waste. It is material that arrived somewhere inconvenient and was never looked at long enough to be understood. Lena Holt looked long enough. When the soil was still gray, and the bank was still counting down, and the town was still slowing to look at her farm, with the expression people save for things they've already decided are nothing. She kept looking, because her father had written "look into this," and she understood what he meant. Not the soil chemistry, the thing other people were looking away from. Look at it long enough. Trust what the looking shows you, and do not stop.